Everyone, welcome to the MMA Freakcast. I'm Edson Valenzuela.
I'm Matthew Salzer.
And today we're going to talk some MMA, just like always. This is our 8th episode now, right, Matt?
Yes.
So we're getting into the swing of things.
Yep.
How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing all right.
That's good to hear.
And it's sort of a few things going on in the world of MMA right now. We want to talk about the latest, one of the latest things to happen. Actually, I think this happened just yesterday. Reebok got into a little bit of trouble
with their recent UFC Ireland shirt.
There's a UFC Ireland T-shirt that Reebok released that has a sort of an outline of a
silhouette, wasn't it?
Of the island. Yeah, there you go. A silhouette of the island of Ireland, but it's not including Northern Ireland. So it's sort of excluding Northern Ireland's not allowed to be part of Ireland anymore,
apparently,
according to Reebok.
Yeah,
those people aren't Irish. Right?
No, they're English. They're British.
And I mean, the situation over there is a weird and complicated political one that we've talked about this. I think that folk over here don't always really think about.
Yeah.
And so, that's sort of an interesting mistake for them to make. What do you? I mean, we have already talked about Reebok on several occasions because they've been in the MMA news cycle consistently.
Well, especially with their sponsorship deal and all the controversies behind that, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But this
How do
does
you think?
not.
What do you think about it?
This doesn't do good to their PR at all. I'm just not sure why they decided to do that. It's Ireland. Leave the island intact. That is the island. That's not the nation. We're not talking about the nation. We're talking about the island.
An interesting thing is that Reebok was founded in the UK. Founded.
The irony.
To be fair.
The irony.
But
the huge irony.
Now it's based out of Massachusetts. It's a U.S. company.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an embarrassing mistake for them to make.
Yeah, that's definitely an embarrassing mistake for them to make, considering that they should know better. They should definitely know.
They're on the radar already, right?
Yeah. And there's actually Northern Irish fighters in the UFC, so I don't understand why they would want to do something like that. It's like I said, it's the island of Ireland. Leave the thing intact. They consider themselves one nation, regardless of how things may be technically with the UK. They are one island.
Mixed martial arts is a baby sport, right?
Yes.
It's a brand new sport. It's a young sport.
Yeah.
We've talked about how, and we're going to talk about later, how there might be some rule changes as to how the sport rules are outlined and the scoring, as far as the scoring goes as well.
It's a constantly evolving.
So this would be another sign, right? Like somebody who's a marketing major is not necessarily an MMA fan. Or a geopolitics or geography fan, actually.
Yeah.
A point is that mistakes like this might be more common in mixed martial arts merchandise. I don't know, because they have amateurish. That's actually no excuse at all. This person is just sort of a. That's a dopey mistake.
That was a dopey mistake. These mistakes have happened before on several occasions. It's just something that this kind of reminds me of the. This kind of reminds me on the scale of like when the last U.S. Olympic team came out with U.S. attire that was made in China. Oh goodness,
that's embarrassing.
That's just stuff like that should not happen. The founder of American Apparel at the time came out and said that he could make the U.S. Olympic. He could make all that apparel for as much as China, if not cheaper. Which, incidentally, I think he probably could have done it.
Well, I mean, that speaks to
the guy. Unfortunately, has since been ousted by American Apparel. I don't know what all the issues are behind that.
Yeah.
Company politics, but still,
that speaks to the general lack of quality. To some of the clothing and the design, maybe. And hey, Reebok's out a little bit of money because they've already made all these shirts. These shirts were released. The shirts that have been sold, I think they were sold. If they were. Those will go for a pretty penny at a later time because they'll be completely discontinued.
Yeah.
So anybody who has their hands on that will have their hands on something kind of weird and interesting, kind of a piece of MMA, sort of a nostalgia
that's-
paraphernalia.
Yeah, definitely something interesting to say at least.
So, speaking about Ireland, transitioning into still a little bit more UFC talk.
Yeah. So UFC, it is the fight card, which is now called UFC Fight Night Houlihan versus Smolka, was originally supposed to be UFC Fight Night Poirier versus Duffy.
Okay.
So there have been two different transitions that have happened in that fight card. The first one happened when October 13th, the UFC, the co-main event, which was going to be between Stipe Miocic and Ben Rothwell, it had title implications. So basically, the next person fighting Verdun.
And frankly, kind of a cool fight.
Yeah, it's a cool fight because, you had Rothwell, who's kind of on a resurgence in his career, and then you have Miocic, who's kind of been flirting in and out of that title area, but never able to fully put together. It's like, this is something that you'd be able to hope to finally put in there. And then lo and behold, what happened? Miocic got injured, and Rothwell was just pulled completely because they couldn't find a replacement for him.
Yeah, so, and we've talked about this already. I think I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast. The fight fans lose out on that one. Heavyweight fights are always fun to watch, and fights with heavyweight implications sort of are always rounding out the heavyweight picture, which should be sort of the UFC's premier focus, as much as the sort of smaller guys have had the limelight in the last few years and whatnot. So that's kind of a bummer, and especially for the UFC trying to put on more fights and quality cards overseas, right?
And this was specifically for the Irish crowd, because over here it was going to be on UFC Fight Pass. It was going to be so those fights, those are all local time there, and we're going to be watching them at we
would be streaming them at what, however, I don't.
Well, the time difference isn't as extreme. We'd probably be seeing it in the morning.
Okay.
Morning, maybe morning stuff like that. So.
All right, that's not as extreme then.
Yeah, that's not as extreme, but it's a time difference. But something I just realized actually looking at
regarding the UFC Dublin card.
Just regarding the UFC in general, and since we brought up Reebok, something I just realized is the fact that one of the reasons why they probably couldn't find a replacement, they need to find someone who was on the UFC roster, because they need to find someone who they could put a uniform on. They can't put it's not like how they used to be, where you just sign somebody who's a prospect on a few days' notice and just throw them in there, because they need to make the uniform for them.
Yeah.
That's another setback to this UFC uniform, is that you can't get it's not like other promotions where there's a late replacement. It's like, oh, hey, throw them in there. That's similar. It's similar to how Patrick Cummins, when he week notice. He stepped in on a week notice to fight Cormier when Rashad Evans got injured. You can't do that nowadays.
You can't do that anymore.
Yeah, you can't do that anymore because they need to make the uniform.
That's an interesting thing that you would not have considered when they were making. So they make the uniform deal. Everybody fixates on, sponsorship and money. And there were, I'm sure, those who knew that there were also going to be further down the line things that we weren't absolutely certain as to how it was going to affect. This is going to be one of those things. To be fair, I think that it does sort of legitimate. It makes it seem a lot more legitimate in terms of they're not just going and looking for some sort of journeyman to put up to slaughter. They're always going to have a sort of cachet of fighters that they could kind of reach out to that are already signed up for whatever deals that they have with Reebok and for whatever contracts that they have for fighters there. So they're sort of, you're right, they can't make interesting fights on short notice anymore that would be exciting ones, because that's actually, how it's happened before. They've made sometimes fights ending this way, and the fights that were made afterwards ended up being an even more interesting attraction than the initial ones. But I don't think this one's really shaping out that way, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, but that's, like I said, that's just one of those setbacks to this deal, because you've basically got steps that are put into place, and you can't fully put those into place because of the fact that you've basically got red tape. That's basically
there you go. An extra layer, an extra barrier to have to get through. You know.
So it's
one that we didn't consider when they first made the deal.
Yeah, it's something that we didn't actually see further down the line. Like when
is this an example of a time that they've set up a fight on short notice?
Go ahead. Yeah, one fight that I could think of was actually for the first event that they actually had it was Chad Mendes versus Conor McGregor. I think.
Okay.
That was a little bit further out. I think they actually had time to make Chad's uniform and stuff like that.
Got it.
So it just depends on how far out the injury is. Obviously, with Rothwell, they didn't feel that they had enough time to make to be able to be able to find a fighter, make the uniform for them, and stuff like that.
Have them set up. I mean, and it's also a matter of them because I'm guessing that there is extra standards the fighters have to now meet if they're going to be also representatives of the Reebok brand, let's say, right?
Right.
One that before they might have been able to just sign a fighter without having to consider whatever standards it is now that they have to meet to be sponsored by Reebok, right? Reebok doesn't want to sponsor maybe people. This is all complete and total reckless speculation on my behalf, but somebody who would say have a violent and criminal background would not be somebody who wouldn't do MMA. So that is to say, MMA has had its fair share of fighters with shady backgrounds, and maybe Reebok as a company wouldn't want to get involved with some of those people.
That's a possibility.
Lee Murray, as far as you're concerned now, looking at the fights that are made now.
Well, obviously for the
and this is happening this weekend.
Yeah. So obviously Stipe Miocic, Ben Rothwell are out. Dustin Poirier, Joseph Duffy, they're out.
Okay.
Because Duffy had a concussion when he was doing
Duffy got a concussion
when he was training. He had a sparring session, got a concussion during training. He was pulled from the card. Okay. So Poirier, Poirier, Miocic, and Rothwell were all fighters that appealed to the general audience. They're the people who maybe someone would want to tune in on to UFC Fight Pass.
Yeah, definitely. Rothwell is somebody who you fight fans would know. I think.
Yeah. Now with how it is, these are basically all regional. These are basically mostly, if not all, regional. Basically regional fighters.
Okay.
That the local crowd is going to fight it. Tune into it.
The local mixed martial arts crowd will have maybe seen some of their fights.
Yeah. I could maybe see some more diehard fans tuning in to watch it on UFC Fight Pass, but the general populace just is not going to be that interested in this fight card anyways. As I said, if you're not subscribed to UFC Fight Pass, this isn't like the type of fight card that someone's going to want to actually pay to get the subscription in order to see it. This just isn't that type of card. So that's basically what it's come down to. It's just come down to another regional fight card. And it's unfortunate considering that, as I said, September, October, this month, and last month were the months that UFC was pulling back on how many fights.
So this is sort of delayed gratification for nothing.
Yeah, basically.
Understood.
So, that's basically what's come down to. This is a fight card that's basically being that's like I said, that's just what it comes down to. I just don't know how else to put it other than it's come down to just another regional fight card. That's with not too many other implications other than that.
So let's, at the very least now, then look at the new main event.
Yeah, Patrick Houlihan and Luis Smolka. Those are two flyweights. I'm not even sure where they are in the rankings. I don't think they've even broken into one or both of them might be in the top 15, but they're not really up there in either the UFC in the UFC rankings for sure. They're not in our rankings. Okay. So they're just
interesting main event though, and I think you're taking it easy on them. This is pretty disappointing. You know?
It's they get.
And again, it's not getting airtime over here really.
Yeah, they get to these guys.
Because we're the only people that matter in the world. I'm joking.
Well, the thing with these guys, they now get to main event a fight card they wouldn't be able to otherwise. That's an advantage for them. They get to
giving them a leg up.
Yes, they get to main event a fight card they wouldn't be able to otherwise. It's just one of those things where they need to step up to the opportunity. Obviously, like I said, it's going to be a 3-round fight just because of the fact that they weren't training for a 5-round fight. Okay. So they'll have to go out there and just perform like they usually
Hopefully
do.
they can let it hang out a little more too. They won't have to pace themselves as they might have for a 5-round fight.
Yes. So yeah, they just go out there, they fight, and may the best man win. Maybe those will get some of them on the radar.
Yeah, exactly. After that, maybe it'll sort of help round out the flyweight division a little more. So to transition, probably the last thing about the UFC that we'll talk about today, Matt. There's an article placed, I think, 2 days ago on BloodyElbow.com regarding both Anderson Silva, I do believe, and Fabricio Verdum placing a little bit of pressure on UFC, on the UFC to have the next card they both perform in, I do believe, be the same card. So they'd co-headline the card, I do believe, and it would be in Brazil. So they want to try and get that fight made in Brazil. Verdum, I think, was quoted as having said that it was 99% a done deal. And lately, his management has sort of changed their tune. It might not happen, but that's what they want.
Well, here's part of
this from a UFC executive as a source for BloodyElbow.com.
Yeah. So here's part of the reasoning behind that. Okay. The UFC. There's currently talks. It's all but a done deal of. The first title fight for Verdum being a rematch with Kane.
Okay, yes.
An immediate rematch. Why you would do that, I don't know, because it was a submission win. It wasn't even a close decision. It was a submission win.
You could make the argument that Kane was the reigning champion, sort of undisputed, and deserves an immediate rematch.
Maybe there, but here's my thought on it. He came in and he was gassed, and he just did not look like himself. And this has always been a philosophy I've believed. I believe that once someone fights, what the loser automatically needs to take a step back, and the next challenger needs to come up. That's always what I've believed. Okay. When it comes to.
So you firmly are against automatic rematches.
I'm against automatic rematches. I think that if a guy is going to fight for the title again, I think he needs to earn that.
So you would not make this exception, even if it was a reigning champion who had a 15-fight defense streak, let's say. You would say, I
was against when Anderson Silva got the immediate rematch, especially considering he lost by knockout.
I see what you mean. Okay, I see.
That case specifically.
So I
could maybe.
You and I have differing opinions on this.
Yeah, I can maybe understand maybe a close decision. Like I'm gonna throw one out there that I totally agreed with. Frankie Edgar versus Gray Maynard 2 ended in a draw. I totally agree with that being an immediate rematch because no one won that fight.
Understood.
Did I spit in your face?
No. I'm trying not to sneeze. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
No, you didn't spit in my face. Okay. So that's interesting. You have very interesting standards as to what, and I think that's actually those are valid. Those are more than valid opinions.
That's kind of also how I felt when Machida defended his title against Shogun the one time.
It was such a close fight that you know what? It's all right.
I was actually more of the opinion that
let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on. Because there's always contenders waiting for the next fight.
For that one, that's a good that to me, I agree with that. And the reason I would is because as close as it was, Machida won. Shogun will be back in 2 fights. Machida, if he's as good as he says he is, he'll win those fights. Shogun will get another chance. That was sort of how I viewed that one. I think, though, that you and I differ in that if there was a champion who was sort of a reigning champion and had defended, I would say more than, and this is my own personal made-up fantasy number, if you've defended your title 5 times and you lose it, I'd say even if it's by knockout, at that point you've earned some sort of almost tenure or benefit in that sense, at least from my perspective, right? It's a matter of
almost like a rematch clause, like
in a way,
like the WWE rematch.
Well,
clause.
there's that. Boxing. I was going to say boxing. So I think before I was an MMA fan, we've talked about it. I was a boxing fan as a kid, and so you become accustomed to the ebb and the flow of boxing, and that is how it is in boxing. The longer a box, and we're talking two different sports, but how traditionally it is sort of the flow of it in boxing, how traditionally it has been is if you're a boxing champion and you win enough fights, you sort of gain so much leverage and you are able to add a rematch clause into whatever contract you have with the company that you're dealing with. Rematch clauses don't exist in the UFC, is that right?
No.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's I guess in boxing that may exist, but in the UFC, nothing's guaranteed. There's a variety of factors, like who's gonna, like how you lost the fight, how like for example, Anthony Pettis, he didn't get a rematch again, an immediate rematch against Rafael Dos Anjos. He needs to fight again. Dos Anjos is fighting Donald Cerrone for the second time, so
yeah.
It just depends on how the match went, how dominant one side was over the other. Like, and then I'm gonna throw out another example. I don't agree that Renan Barão initially was gonna get the rematch, which ultimately didn't happen.
Okay.
Because of his weight issues. But
all right.
I didn't agree with that, and ultimately he actually didn't get the immediate rematch. He needed to earn his rematch back. But I've always held to this belief: you lose, you need to earn that title shot again. That's how I've always felt, regardless of whether you were the champion or whether you were the challenger.
So you're saying this in reference to the rematch, the heavyweight rematch that the UFC is putting on. Sorry, you're saying this in reference to the heavyweight rematch that the UFC is putting on again, featuring Fabricio Verdum and Cain Velasquez. Touching back on what I'd mentioned about the article on Bloody Elbow 2 days ago, Verdum and Anderson Silva reportedly both wanting a fight card, or rather, a fight card with them co-headlining, featuring what would be, the Verdum Cain Velasquez rematch. Now,
here's my reasoning for. Here's what I think here. I think that's only fair, considering that the last fight was in Mexico City. That would be considered Cain's home field advantage.
There you go. So
it would only be fair then that the home field advantage
then be given to Verdum as the champion.
This has happened also, for example, with Ronda Rousey, because Ronda Rousey has gotten home field advantage. UFC 184, she fought at she fought in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is
her hometown.
That's where she lives. That's where she settled. That's where all of her people are. That's where would be considered her hometown. That's just where she fights. But then a little while later, you had her fighting Bete Correa in Brazil.
In Brazil, yeah.
Yeah. So
it's
this is not new.
New territory.
This is not a new concept. It's happened before. So I think that's
all UFC events listed so far for the remainder of the year, and this includes some of early to mid next year, already have their destinations sort of etched out. The closest Brazil event is already set for November 7th, so it can't be that one. That's going to be the Belfort Henderson 3 match. That is to say, the third match.
I'm still trying to figure out what exactly the point is for that fight.
To put on a card in Brazil the same way they're putting one on in Ireland this weekend.
I know they both had classic fights in their first fight in Pride, and then the second one.
And sometimes it's good to kill two birds with one stone, I can imagine, right? Let's knock those out. I was going to mention, though, that the next UFC fight that does not have a scheduled location is UFC 197. So assuming that, and this is again
that'd be all the way in
speculation,
March.
That would be all the way in March. So if they were to say eventually bend to Verdum's reported will in wanting this to be a card that takes place in Brazil, the next slot they could place that in would be UFC 197,
And,
March 5th, 2016.
I think that would actually make
Some sense.
At first they would make perfect sense if you're talking about Anderson Silva, because my initial thought was, wait, isn't Silva still going to be on suspension?
Okay.
But I just realized by that time I think his suspension was only a year, so that would actually he'd be off his suspension by then, so that would actually make him eligible to fight, because the UFC usually. Yeah, the UFC usually
waits a little while.
Well, they usually try to respect a commission handled suspension. That's
Okay.
what they usually try to do.
Okay.
And let's see, I'm trying to
Sort of pin down when his suspension ended.
yes. Let's see.
And again, this is speculation on the both of us, but just sort of piecing together the recent announcements. And again, his management themselves reportedly said to BloodyElbow.com that it was closer to a 60-40 chance that might happen. But if you and I were to just do a little bit of sleuthing, I'd say that March might be the day that they would be able to hold that card.
Oh yeah, 1 year retroactive is the day of the
In
fight.
Brazil.
So yeah, which was January 9th. So
He'd be good to go.
Yes, he'd be good to go. He'd be way good to go.
Okay.
So
and so we'll keep an eye out, and if they, if they announce that, we'll remind
Oh,
everyone.
that was the 30. Yeah, that was the 31st. So yeah, either way, he'd be good to go.
Yeah.
That would. So that could happen. That could definitely happen.
And that would be a fun card and an awesome card to happen in Brazil. Those are two marquee fighters. One of them is the heavyweight champion. Brazil.
One of them's a legend in the sport.
And Brazil.
And it's Brazil. Brazil, as
the
far as
birthplace of modern mixed martial arts.
as far as I know, Brazil is not as rowdy as the Irish, because the Irish actually hold the UFC record for loudest arena.
That's incredible.
But the Brazilians there, they're definitely a different breed in and of themselves. They love their national heroes. So I think
that would be a cool fight card to make.
Yeah, that would be a cool fight card to make. I do think so. The question though is who would be Silva's opponent. I'm not completely sure on that one, because who would want to fight someone other than? Who would want to fight a guy who basically? It's still hard to tell how well he's readjusted from that injury, especially since he tested positive for steroids. I actually, in that and looking that up quickly, there were some.
This is Anderson Silva testing positive for steroids.
It wasn't just steroids. It was also some banned substances. I still don't buy them saying a tainted sexual enhancement drug. It's like, dude, why do you need? It's okay.
It's speculation. So, can you think of any middleweights? The only ones I can think of we just talked about are Henderson and Belfort having a fight this month, and maybe if one of them is okay, they could kind of take them on again in March. If March would be when, let's say, early next year.
Both of them have fought him before, and I think they probably would want to actually
do it again.
Yeah, do it again and actually see if they can't get the victory.
Why not?
They both fought him
at this point. They might be able to.
Yeah, they both fought him before, and they both only fought him once, and they lost to him once. And there was actually a point in the fight with Dan Henderson where Henderson was actually winning that fight.
Yes, he had control at least. Yeah.
Yes, he won that first round, and then that second round things kind of started going, awry. Then of course that fight with Belfort, the thing that obviously changed everything was that front face kick. Yeah, front kick. Yeah. That basically dropped him. That later Machida used on Randy Couture, sending his tooth flying all over the place.
So December 12th, and we're flashing forward, and I'll just touch on this for just a minute. December 12th will feature the next couple of middleweight bouts, including the championship bout between Chris Weidman and Luke Rockhold, but it'll also feature a bout that I think.
Ronaldo
I would
Souza
hope that this would be
Yoel
for.
Romero.
I mean, I don't know if Yoel Romero would probably be in line for a contendership, if not a title shot.
He's been rising steadily.
Yeah.
He has definitely been rising steadily. And another thing I think, I'm really wondering if Dana White's going to hold to his saying, "Keep Christ out of the octagon." He said that after that apparent last misunderstanding with Yoel Romero put in there, and it's first of all, do you really want to? You've already got a class action lawsuit against you for various other stuff. Do you really want to throw the possibility of religious discrimination in there as well? I mean, it's like, Dana White, do you really want to risk that? Do you really want to risk that?
You know,
I think well,
it's an interesting topic.
It's shy about
there's that language barrier, though, right?
Yeah,
where
true.
It's like perhaps
he
doesn't express himself as clearly as he means to. Right?
Yeah. English is his second language, and it's very broken right now. He's not very clear yet. He is Cuban, so.
And Dana White says broad. He makes broad strokes. He paints with a broad stroke brush.
Unless he's talking about something specifically, at which point he's taking.
He nitpicks a little bit.
At which point he's taking a pen and outlining it.
All right, so touching back on the middleweight fights.
Yes, the middleweight fights. So, Ronaldo Souza, Yoel Romero.
You know, the loser of that fight.
That does have title implications. That fight does have title implications.
And let's say that the card does take place in March. The loser of that fight might even be able to take on Anderson Silva. Let's say, completely speculating now. Let's say Souza loses the fight in December, right? Jacare loses that fight. And then you got a match between Anderson. So you could set up a match between Anderson Silva and Jacare early next season. Yeah, or early next year. Yeah, one in Brazil. Why not?
Yeah, because that one was also that was also one of those matchups.
That's almost a dream match.
That was teased for a very long time. So that's another possibility. I actually wish you would actually go back.
What's up? What do you want to look at?
Yeah, so of course, also with that fight card, you got the.
Sorry.
You've got the.
It's not this one. So we're talking now the UFC 194, I believe, right? Yeah, UFC 194. 193. This will take place in December.
Yes, 193 is next week, but we'll talk about that more when it comes to it.
Yeah.
Then you also have the Jose Aldo Conor McGregor matchup.
And the reason we were touching on this was to sort of elaborate on the middleweight stuff. But go ahead about the lightweight championship. Finally, the match we've been looking forward to in this featherweight. The fight that McGregor saved by beating
Chad Mendes.
Yeah, go on. What were you going to say about it? And this will give us a chance to. This will truly be the last thing we say about the UFC, and then we'll move on to World Series of Fighting stuff that happened this week.
Yes, that'll be an interesting matchup, considering that, like I said, there's. Or actually, no, not like I said, but I'll just say it right now.
Okay.
Because
you might have said if you had. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. So that'll be an interesting fight because of Conor McGregor's flashier style versus nowadays Jose Aldo has a tendency. He's still a dangerous fighter, but he has a tendency to. I hate to say it. I think he has a tendency to play it safe nowadays.
Okay.
Because I don't even remember the last time he got the last time he got a victory.
Jose Aldo.
Yeah, finish.
This is the UFC featherweight champion, Jose Aldo.
It may have been the Korean Zombie, and that was only because of a shoulder injury. Yeah, it was the Korean Zombie, and that was 2 years ago. So, and that was only because of a shoulder injury. He just started taking him out from the side, and that was only one of in his past 7 fights, he's only finished 2 of them. Wow. Mark Hominick was a decision. Kenny Florian was a decision. He the first time he faced Chad Mendes, he knocked him out with a knee. I think it's the midsection.
Okay.
Then he went to a decision with Frankie Edgar. He took out
the
Korean Zombie, and then he against Ricardo Lamas and Chad Mendes.
He's had some tough ones though, right? He's been in some sort of tough wars, hasn't he?
Yeah, but he was still, back in WEC, he was massacring people.
Yeah.
Yeah, you look at look at his.
We're talking Jose Aldo right now, the featherweight champion.
Yeah, look at his WEC record compared to his UFC record. His WEC record, Let's see. TKO, knockout, TKO, decision, knockout. Only one of his let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8 fights in the WEC was by knockout.
Well, yeah, well, maybe there's something to say to Dana White's claim that the UFC is the premier fight organization with the toughest competition. All right, Matt. So you were able to break down the UFC's last. Go ahead.
Oh yeah,
last thing.
Yes, last thing. So
because we got to move on to World Series of Fighting.
Yes, let's go back to.
Go ahead.
Let's go back to that. Is Tisha Torres versus Michelle Watterson. If you want to talk about that one.
This isn't until December, so make it very quick, please.
Okay, so Tiny Tornado versus the Karate Hottie.
All right.
This should be an interesting fight, considering that you've got definitely a fighter who's moved up in weight, because Michelle Watterson was fighting at atom weight and is now going to be fighting someone comparable in size to her. Your Tisha Torres is kind of short compared to the rest of the strawweights, but this is significant because as Michelle Watterson, I think, has the potential to be one of the greater stars in the UFC.
All right.
Just depending on the matchups and stuff like that. Because,
it's a couple weeks out, right? We'll have a chance to talk about it.
Yeah,
before then.
That's a month out. But yeah,
all right.
Yeah, we'll have enough time to talk about that. Okay,
that's on your radar, though.
Yes, that's okay. Yeah, enough about the UFC.
Maybe you could write something up about how Miss Watterson would be, True.
Okay.
So now we're moving on.
World Series of Fighting.
World Series of Fighting. It happened this weekend.
Yes, World Series
24?
of Fighting. This happened. Yeah, 24 happened this weekend, and it was Fitch versus Okami.
So these are two ex-UFC dudes.
Yes, two ex-UFC dudes. John Fitch was in there for the longest time.
Fighting, but they're fighting at a welterweight fight. These two, Okami was
at middleweight for the
dude.
longest time. This
moved
was
down to welterweight while still in the UFC.
No. This is his welterweight debut.
Okay.
Fitch was always Fitch
was a steady,
during his
kind
UFC,
of a big welterweight.
Yeah, during his he was a big welterweight.
Okay. So this is the main event.
I should note that his fight with George St. Pierre was interesting because St. Pierre hit him so hard that
was gnarly.
Hit him so hard that part of his mouthpiece came out.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
It broke his mouthpiece.
He beat him up.
So
he beat him up.
So,
all right, so the main event was John Fitch, Yushin Okami, and this was not a championship bout.
No, this was not a championship bout.
Okay, so it was a bout between two ex-marquee UFC guys.
Go
ahead.
The winner, which was John Fitch, could possibly be
by decision, unanimous decision in 3 rounds.
He could maybe be fighting for the vacant World Series of Fighting welterweight championship since
the incident with Pokey Eyes.
Yes, since Rousimar Paul Harris was stripped of the title.
Okay.
So this
helps bring that welterweight division for the World Series of Fighting into focus.
Yes, so there's that potential there. Then in the co-main event, you had Blagoy Ivanov versus Derek. I think that's
Memen, yeah, and we talked. I think we previewed this card last week. So this is a championship bout, heavyweight bout. What happened?
It was won by Ivanov by TKO. Ivanov is actually a
Ivanov, yeah.
Yeah, Ivanov made his name for himself for American audiences in Bellator.
Okay, so this guy's an ex-Bellator sort of heavyweight contender.
Yes, he was one of those guys who fought under Bjorn Rebney, and then after that, I guess it was a combination of maybe Bjorn leaving and maybe his contract coming due, and him just deciding to go with another promotion. But that's well, and like I said, Ivanov's claim to fame is that he beat Fedor Emelianenko in a summer. Yes. Well, and the thing with World Series of Fighting is that they've actually been smart in picking up a bunch of former UFC fighters and these are I genuinely don't think these are has-been fighters.
Okay.
These are just Okami was let go rather suddenly. Fitch was let go rather suddenly. Hamilton was just Hamill.
Mixed martial arts.
Yeah,
it's sort of a regional sport in its heart, at its core,
yes.
right? Guys flow in and out from different spots and organizations.
Yeah. So yeah, these. I think that. Well, and then these are these are fighters that Dana White's kind of taken that more aggressive stance against journeymen. He basically doesn't want.
He doesn't want to encourage that sort of athlete.
He basically doesn't want that in his sport anymore because he knows that in order to make the UFC relevant, he needs to be constantly cycling new fighters, more exciting fighters in and out of the sport. So he can't afford it. And with as many athletes as he now has on the roster, and as many as he's got, and with as many fight cards as he's got to be constantly finding the better fighter. He can't afford to keep these longtime veterans, which is why he eventually let go Koscheck.
Yeah, and everybody has an expiration date except for the really, really sort of the really iconic fighters with the UFC. So it's kind of a bummer.
Like I said, that was his stance before we had this sudden Bellator rise, at which point he started basically getting fighters in order to put it in more mild lingo, in order to basically cock block Bellator.
Okay.
So
cock blockery abound.
Yes.
Understanding.
So, because he didn't want them getting Krokop. He picked up Krokop from him. And he's trying to pick up Rampage. I still don't know what that situation is. That's a complicated situation. Rampage honestly should not have signed with if he didn't. I don't know.
So
Rampage is just a different guy.
Moving on to the next fight after the champ. So actually, who won the championship out again?
Ivanov.
So Ivanov won that by TKO punches, second round. 4 minutes 33 seconds, the second round. Yes. So he is the champion, the World Series of Fighting heavyweight champion. Now, the next bout was a lightweight bout.
Yes, between the one-armed Nick Newell and Tom Marcelino. And this fight's actually significant because after the fight,
what was the result of the fight?
It was a decision win. After the fight, Newell announced his retirement.
And Nick Newell won the fight by decision.
Yes.
All right. So he's done. He won.
He decided to go out on win. He didn't feel like. I think some of the reasons he said was that he didn't feel like his body was really with it anymore, and he didn't feel that his spirit was completely in it anymore. Yeah. So he decided to go out on a high note, and I can understand that. I think he had a little bit more potential. I would have liked to eventually seen him in the UFC, but
and this was a fight against Tom Marcelino, but it was good. It's an interesting career. This is a one-armed fighter in a combat sport, right? That's just not something you see every day,
Yeah, it was good. It was nice to see him have the career that he did, and I'm sure he's an inspiration to many in the disabled community. Well, as is Matt Hamill, which was
the very next fight. That's a nice segue, right? So the next fight was a light heavyweight fight.
Vinny Magalhaes versus Matt Hamill, and he won by Kneebar.
Vinny Magalhaes won by Kneebar against Matt Hamill, ex-UFC fighter Matt Hamill, ex-The Ultimate Fighter alum, in fact, Matt Hamill.
So was Vinny.
Oh, I apologize.
He didn't have.
Just to show you what I know.
Yeah, but he didn't have as long of a tenure as Matt Hamill.
Okay.
He was in there. I think he got that one fight with the UFC, and then he was out, and he's kind of been floating in and out of various MMA promotions.
So Matt Hamill had a tough loss. Matt Hamill, this is a deaf fighter, right? Deaf fighter from the UFC veterans, sort of older season.
He initially retired.
205.
Yeah, he initially retired and then decided to come back, but he was coming back off of a loss, so I guess the UFC didn't want to bring him back, so he went to World Series of Fighting. So, he lost by Kneebar. Hopefully he can get a rebound at some point. And then the only other really significant fight after that was the inaugural flyweight championship for World Series of Fighting was Magomed Bibulatov versus Donovan Frillo. And he won that by unanimous decision.
Who won this bad boy?
Bibulatov.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Magomed Bibulatov won against
Donovan Frillo.
All right, in the inaugural flyweight bout for the World Series of Fighting. Yep. But, a 5-round decision. A long fight, nice long fight for the fans to start off the night, and overall, it seems like it was a decent fight card. Some decisions there peppered in, and got to see two named fighters, Okami and Fitch, kind of duel it out for the last bout of the night.
Yes.
So World Series of Fighting continuing to put on some solid cards. That one out of Connecticut.
Yes, that was and it's rather interesting because the next fight that the next event that World Series of Fighting is holding in Phoenix, Arizona, is a 8-man tournament.
All right.
Now, for those of you who do not know, 8-man tournaments haven't been that common in MMA nowadays, except
you don't really see the bracket tournament style that much anymore.
Yeah, well, the 8-man one-night tournaments specifically haven't been that common, especially once the unified rules were put into play.
Now this is happening.
Basically, weren't allowed.
This is a one-night tournament.
Right. This is a one-night tournament. This
is throwback.
Yes. It's 8-man one-night tournaments basically weren't put into play that much because of the fact that they were that the unified rules stated you're not allowed to fight more than 25 minutes in a night.
Okay.
So,
okay.
And the way that the abysmally failed Yama pit fighting tried to do that was by having two 1 minute or 2 5-minute. The first 2 rounds were basically 5-minute fights. Okay. So basically, whoever won the round, and then the last round was a normal 15.
Okay. So that was their workaround, and they're going to try and do a similar sort of workaround with the World Series of Fighting?
Actually, no. There was actually a tournament. I can't remember how long ago. Let me actually try to look this up. There was actually a tournament in. It was actually a tournament. I can't remember if it was early last year or late, or if it was early last year or late this year. Okay, that's not.
And was it a tournament from who?
It was a regional tournament. It was a regional promotion.
Okay. And it held a one-night tournament as well.
Yeah. So
this regional MMA promotion held a one-night tournament.
Yes, they held a one-night tournament as well, and I'm still trying to find that. Who did that?
Well, it's all right. I mean, elaborate on the point that you're trying to make if you can't find it.
I think that what happened was that they I think what they did was they probably found it was Battlegrounds MMA. That's what it was. It was Battlegrounds MMA.
Okay.
And it was interesting because this was the first fight that Chael Sonnen was doing commentary for after his suspension. And it was and Jim Ross, who is of WWE fame, was also doing commentary. Okay. So it was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was Battleground MMA. They did a one-night tournament for the they did a one-night tournament.
And this was in the continental U.S.
Yes, it was in the continental U.S. I think what happened here is that since things are being a little bit more, I think the athletic commissions are being a little bit more lenient in things like this, where they're starting to accept that mixed martial arts is a normal entity. Yeah, it's not the scary thing that people might have thought it was. Yeah, they're not being. And I think it also partially depends on the state that you're in, because there was that the Bellator Dynamite card that was recently held, and they had a 2-man tournament in there, which consisted of two 5-minute rounds with a chance of a sudden overtime. Okay. So it just depends on. I think it also depends. Like I said, it just depends on the commission.
I mean, we're perhaps starting to find this sort of middle ground between what once was considered hardcore MMA style tournaments and what is now the standard, which is just a fight card, normal fight card. If it's a tournament, it'll be spread out over a few years, and it won't exactly usually pan out the way it's supposed to because injuries and sort of suspensions are so variable.
Well, you know what Bellator did was they had the seasonal format. And they spread their tournaments overseas.
There you go. So there are ways to work around it, but now hopefully we're able to. I like one-night tournaments. I like seeing somebody go up against maybe more than one person in an evening. It's sort of an interesting Ironman or endurance test.
Yeah. So this one-night tournament, the quarterfinals, obviously everything else is going to be completely dependent on things.
And this is good. Where's this taking place?
This is taking place in Phoenix, Arizona.
This is the week of Thanksgiving.
Yes, at November 20th. Yeah, at the Comerica Center. So it's and wins and whatnot. But I also suspect that maybe the Arizona Commission may be doing some lightening up there. But it's Mike Ricci versus Brian Cobb. That's the preliminary. Luis Palomino, who in his fight with Justin Gaethje, the lightweight champion, the first fight was a fight of the year. Mm-hmm. So then Brian Foster versus Joa Zeffrini, and then Jorge Patino versus Islam Mamedov.
And this is in an upcoming World Series of Fighting.
Yeah, this is their next event.
We'll be able to break this down in detail coming up.
Yeah, next event is next month. It's going to be a one-night tournament. 8 rounds. And something I think that would probably help is if the fights if the fights went short, because in the Battlegrounds event, that's actually what happened. Most of the fights actually went short. That's what happened with the champion. He finished most of his fights and ended up just getting that's how he got the win there. So, but we'll see how that goes. But yeah, it's a little throwback there.
So this will be the last thing we talk about today.
Oh, let's also throw out that since
very quickly right now.
Yeah, Soa Palele's retirement from MMA, because
mentioning earlier the retirement as well, right?
Yes. We mentioned Newell's retirement. Soa Palele was actually released from the UFC after his loss to Antonio Bigfoot Silva.
Okay.
So
he decided his career was on a downturn.
Yeah, he decided. Well, actually, he'd won most of his fights, but he just lost to Antonio Silva. But
the slightest downturn.
Yeah, so he decided to call it a career. But you have to remember, he's been fighting. One of his earlier fights was in Pride.
Yeah.
So
he's been around for a little while now.
For a while, so
fairly well to both of them, Nick Newell and Soa Palele.
Yeah, it was nice to see them, fight when they were. So, guys, thanks for very memorable fights in your careers. It was nice to watch you guys fight.
Thank you very much, guys. And this is the last thing I wanted to talk about today, Matt, before we wrap it up. One piece of news that was sort of broken earlier this month. The earliest report that I could find was BJPen.com, and that was that Sakuraba will be facing Shinya Aoki at a year-end event in Japan, a New Year's Eve event.
With Rizin Fighting Federation, the same promotion that
also is going to be handling the...
Yes, recently handled Fedor, and they signed a deal with Spike. The year event is actually going to be on Spike. Whether it's live or whether it's tape delayed,
it's still to be seen.
I'm not 100% sure, but it's going to be broadcast on Spike. Eventually, the idea is eventually Fedor is going to fight in Bellator.
Okay.
Eventually, but and I guess you could also see Bellator going to Japan also.
Okay.
But this has classic Japanese freak show all over
it. Freak show,
because you have Sakuraba, who hasn't really fought in.
He's retired like twice now, I thought. So that's interesting. And regardless of how long it's been since he's fought, this is somebody whose prime was in the very early 2000s.
Yeah, when he was in Pride, and
at this point he's a 46-year-old Japanese wrestler, and sort of most famous for some big wins against the Gracie family in Pride FC.
When he was known as the Gracie Killer.
That's what earned him the moniker of the Gracie Killer. And,
yes.
you know, he after that sort of, he crested with his wins over them and then sort of, ran into a few tough fights against, Vanderlei Silva and others of that sort. And so, a huge Japanese MMA sports figure, but definitely well past his prime.
Yeah, this just has. Well, first of all, he's significantly bigger than Aoki. Aoki fights at lightweight and 155 and.
Sakuraba spent most of his career at 180.
Yeah, in the
190.
Yeah, in the 180, 190 range.
Yeah.
Fought. He never. The only time I think he ever really cut was when he fought Maria Zaromskis at the Dynamite 2010 card for the Dream Welterweight Championship. That's the only time he actually
2010.
cut. Yes,
so
that's the only time he cut weight.
And so to be clear again now, this is a fight occurring this December, New Year's Eve event. Risen, I think, was the name of the organization.
Risen Fighting Championship.
Between mixed martial arts Japanese icon Kazushi Sakuraba, whose last fight was in 2011 against Shinya Aoki, a significantly younger Japanese mixed martial arts icon as well.
Who at one point was ranked number 2, some even consider him number 1 in the world.
Yeah, lightweight,
back when BJ Penn was fighting. But
then that might have been a little.
But then Penn lost to. But then what happened was Penn lost to Frankie Edgar, and simultaneously at the same time, Aoki lost to Gilbert Melendez.
There you go.
It was this passing of the torch pretty much.
The next generation, essentially, yeah.
Yeah, so it was,
what do you think? What do you think about this bout? I mean, besides Freak Show, it's not really one that anybody that is a real MMA fan should be interested in watching, right?
I don't really
Not
have much
necessarily,
else to say other than Japanese Freak Show.
That's unfortunate.
This is Japanese Freak Show written all over it. I've seen many a Japanese Freak Show, especially when I lived in Japan. There was just many a Japanese Freak Show. You had like Bob Sapp versus. Name almost any MMA match in which Bob Sapp was involved in, and that's pretty much almost any Japanese match. Akebono, you saw those matches. Fedor was involved in a few of them. Fought Zuluhu, fought Hongman Choi, fought Matt Linlin. It's just like, the name goes on and on. Japanese Freak Show.
Typical. I mean, and stuff like this has happened before, and sometimes it's fun, and this one is kind of gross towards unpleasant, not quite as fun. I mean, when you
describe this as gross.
Well,
that's a interesting word.
And what I mean by that is, I don't think it's in Sakuraba's best interest to take on this fight.
Not really.
And that clearly the people who are taking advantage of him do not care.
Yeah.
I would describe that as gross.
He's been fighting. I suspect this is just one of those things where he
of course he probably wants to, but somebody, eventually should tell him different.
You know what? This is probably one of those things where he just doesn't want to say no. He's been in what's been happening? He's been in pro wrestling for so long. He's just like, oh, I'm having fun doing this. That's honestly, compared to MMA, that's probably honestly more of a safer profession, honestly, because you're not going to get these on the head that often.
Of course, yeah. So, if I don't know. What else is there to say? If you're cool with today's show, Matt, I think I'm about ready to wrap it up. How do you feel?
Yeah, I think it was. I think this was a good show. I think we covered all of the bases, and
it was a cool week, right? More interesting than last week. Definitely more interesting.
Yeah, this was not that much going on last week.
So, what do you want to say before we signed off, man?
Well, let's see. I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but there's actually this show that Dana White's producing. I mentioned this before, but go ahead. There's a show that Dana White's producing. It's called like Fight Finder or something like that.
All right.
But it's about him going around with Matt Serra and this one guy who I guess he calls Tooth because he's missing a tooth.
Yeah.
But they're going around the country looking at these developmental shows where they're actually looking for fighters with promise and getting them into the UFC. Apparently, Dana White did this before the UFC really hit it big in order to find various talent. But
so now he's sort of restructuring that and making it a reality show.
Yeah, and making that a reality show. So he's hopping on his private jet with Sarah and
like he does.
Yeah, and he's going to these various shows. I'm gonna try watching that. I'm gonna try to do a review on that, and then we can actually discuss this. My understanding is there's only one episode out. It's on YouTube. I think the UFC's YouTube, but I'm gonna try watching that pilot, see if we can come back to that, and then we'll go from there.
All right. So MMA-Freak.com is the website. This is the MMA Freakcast. My name is Edson Valenzuela.
And I'm Matthew Salzer. At Matthew Salzer.
And I'm at Edson_V. So catch us next Thursday. We'll be podcasting and forthcoming. As far as me, I think I have an interview with women's mixed martial arts prospect Ashley Yoder. Not sure how to pronounce that yet.
Yeah.
I should get that right before I have her on.
And I'll see if I can't still try getting some major guests on the show. I've been a little distracted with other stuff, but I'll see if I can try getting some guests on the show. So we'll be working on that.
Thank you all again.
Yep, and also the Twitter for the
I almost forgot that.
MMA Freak is at MMA Freakout. So
until next week, you all see you next Thursday.
Yep. Bye.
Peace.